Thank you everyone for coming tonight. My name is Greg Porter, and I lead the International Services and the Service to the Armed Forces programs for the Red Cross here in Greater New York. On behalf of our CEO, Mary Barnaby, I'm extremely excited to welcome Mr. Francesco Rocca, President of the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, who's joined by the American Red Cross Senior Director of Media Relations and International Communications, Jenelle. We're really happy to have both of you here tonight, so thank you. I'd also like to recognize the IFRC Deputy Head of Delegation to the United Nations, Liana Cassian, whose office made tonight possible. Thank you. I did the best I could. I'm certain that this will be an incredible opportunity for all of us to learn more about some of the urgent humanitarian work that's taking place all over the world today. And maybe we'll get to hear a little bit of what's on the horizon for the future. Helping to guide this conversation is our moderator, Michael de Beaupillier, who serves as Communications Officer for the American Red Cross in Greater New York. I thank all of you, those here in the room and those on Zoom, for being with us tonight and for your interest in Red Cross's international programs. So without further ado, Michael, please take it away.
Thank you, Greg, and good evening, everyone. So to those attending in person here in New York and online over Zoom, thank you so much. Welcome. It should be a really great conversation. I'm thrilled to be here to moderate this conversation with these two humanitarians who will bring different perspectives to our conversation about the urgent work of the global Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. The discussion will get into the related topics of the situation in Ukraine and neighboring countries, as well as the general theme of migration. And yes, there's a lot to say about both. I will talk to our esteemed guests for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions from those of you in person and online, and the Zoom chat will be moderated. So I encourage you to write questions, and we'll get to those at the end of the conversation. So now to intros. Mr. Francesco Rocca serves as President of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, and also as President of the Italian Red Cross. Prior to taking on these roles at the Italian Red Cross, he served as the head of the Italian Red Cross Emergency Operations in 2008 and its Extraordinary Commissioner between 2009 and 2013, before being appointed National President in 2013, and later National President of the Italian Red Cross Association. During his service with the Italian Red Cross, he also took on roles with the IFRC. He served as Vice President of the IFRC Europe from 2013 to 2017, and was the Italian Red Cross representative to the IFRC Governing Board from 2009 to 2013. Francesco, we could not be happier to host you. We've had you here before. You know, you're part of the Red Cross Greater New York family. I know that you've met us here a couple times, and there's also a team from Greater New York that visited you and met you in Solferino in 2019. So welcome. Really happy to have you. Next, we have Jenelle Eli. She directs media relations for the American Red Cross and leads communication strategy for 3 lines of business: international services, service to the armed forces, and training services. In addition to this role, she also deploys to crisis zones on behalf of the IFRC, where she serves as spokesperson and storyteller. She is deployed all over the globe, including the Bahamas just after Hurricane Dorian, Europe in response to the Ukraine crisis, and aboard the refugee rescue vessel in the Mediterranean Sea, among many other deployments. Jenelle is an incredible storyteller who does such a great job at capturing the work of the international and local Red Cross, all listed with such empathy. So it's great to see you again, Jenelle.
Same.
So before we get into the context of your visits here in New York, we wanted to touch on, let me start over. Before we get into the context of your visits to New York this week and the general topic of migration, I want to start with the conflict in Ukraine, which is so top of mind. On a side note, I want to speak briefly about how the Red Cross here in Greater New York has engaged in Eastern Europe since the conflict began. TR humans from our client services and recovery team recently supported the IFRC cash assistance program in Poland. Marco Kokic, who's a photographer with both the Canadian Red Cross and American Red Cross, and a resident of Westchester, recently deployed to Eastern Europe with the IFRC to capture the work of local volunteers there. Andy Lee from our IT team will soon be deploying to Romania with the IFRC to support telecommunications needs. And Lalita Maharaj from our local Service to the Armed Forces program is in Eastern Europe addressing emergency communication needs of U.S. service members. So I want to start with Francesco. Hoping you could set the stage for us and talk about a big picture view of the scope of the crisis in Ukraine and in neighboring countries as it stands now for those impacted.
First of all, thank you very much, Mike. Thank you for the question, but let me thank the colleagues, the volunteers, the staff of the chapter. It's true, I feel at home. So this is not my first visit here. Now we have this strong bond, and I'm happy to come and visit. It's like when I, as a president of the Italian Red Cross, I go and visit one of our chapters. So we share all the same values, the same principle, the same commitment and dedication for our communities. So it's really a real joy for me to be here. Ukraine, let me start. So about the pride to be the president of the IFRC in this period. So we are talking about something very sad, of course, something very difficult, and the impact in Ukraine has been one of the toughest, even beyond our imagination. So no one of us could imagine what now is happening on the ground. But nevertheless, I've seen the miracle that I've always seen in many crises. So the ability of the national society to give the best. The ability of the national society, I'm talking about the Ukrainian Red Cross, to really increase the way they are rooted at community level. And in this case, when it comes about wars and about conflict, also it's very difficult to protect and to be consistent with our values and principles, because you are tested, and you are tested in a different way than when you are tested by a natural disaster. And especially when it comes about neutrality, especially when it comes about independence. So we have these principles that are difficult sometimes to live and to express in a community that is wounded. And these, the Ukrainian Red Cross leadership and volunteers were able and are able to do and protect every day since the beginning of the crisis. So this is one reason of the pride. The second is the way they are working. The magnitude is something unbelievable. We are talking about millions of IDPs in the country and millions that have fled the country to reach other safety in other areas of Europe. So immediately we set up a mechanism of coordination with the Ukrainian Red Cross, putting as IFRC at the center of our activity the Ukrainian Red Cross, defining the strategy and the response, listening to the Ukrainian Red Cross that was able really to define the picture and the needs of their community. And in a few hours, I would say, the entire system of the European Red Cross, and then also, of course, also other national societies, but of course, the first responders were the neighboring countries. And sometimes we are talking also of countries that didn't experience even disasters or big disasters in the recent decades. So they were really new to cope with such a magnitude of pressure, and psychological and operational pressure. And once again, this is not only Ukraine. Thinking about the Polish Red Cross, the Moldovan Red Cross, the Romanian Red Cross, and all the others, Hungary, Slovak, they were all on the front line. In a few hours, they were at the border, receiving and providing aid to those who were arriving. You remember, especially in the first weeks, and this in a well-coordinated manner. So this is something that really impressed me. And within the country, we have seen the miracle that I was talking before. So that's now we started having more or less in Ukraine 3,000 volunteers all over the country. Now they are close to 10,000, so they are growing and growing. This is also a very good sign in terms of trust that they are able to build at community level and the quality of the services that they are delivering. And I'm saying this because since the very first day, I was in touch with the leadership of the Ukrainian Red Cross one or twice a day, just to talk, to encourage them, but also to listen about their needs. You know, in the Federation, we have very, very clear roles and responsibilities. The Secretariat, coordinated by Jagan and the regional office, they were running all the activities and operation. My role is more political, but even in these cases, to listen and to have this kind of dialogue with them was important, just to perceive if everything was fine. Let's have this kind of friendly talk, just to understand. And I was impressed also by the rational form in which they were reading the difficult crisis that they were having on the country, the clear list of goods that they were needing in a very rational form, so that we could organize ourselves abroad and send the goods that they needed, responding to the real needs of the community. And when I visited them together, we were in Vinica, because for a period, now they are back since a few days, 2 or 3 days ago, they moved back in Kiev, but at the beginning, they moved the headquarters in Vinica, which is an important city of Ukraine, but it's not the capital, just because the line was difficult in Kiev, and they wanted to stay in touch with the nearly 20 regions of Ukraine, so that they can stay connected 24/7 with the local branches to receive all the feedbacks that they needed to send the request of aid to the sister national society. So when I visited them, it was I was impressed, because some of the staff and volunteers that were working around the clock, I can say, in the headquarters, some of them, they came from Mariupol. Some of them, they had the news of their parents and relatives since days and days. And they were able to stay rational, not emotional, you know, with the clarity of serving community. Maybe, of course, it was also an help to work hard, just not to think about what was happening in their city of origin, where the roots are. But I was impressed by the dedication and the way they were working. So I think that, and also another aspect which is very relevant, the Ukrainian Red Cross did the 75% of the evacuations from the front line. And we are not talking about only, because we have seen families at the border, but think about the psychiatric hospitals in the affected areas, the center for the disabled, people affected with severe disabilities. They were evacuated. So they did an impressive job in silence, with the necessary professionalism, and really it's something that they are writing a new page of our humanitarianism. Why I'm saying a new page is not to be rhetorical, because some of you have met me, I'm not rhetorical, but we have to be clear. So when maybe some of you have listened me talking about the localization process. Normally, it's something that is theoretical, talking about localization. So the role of the local actors in the humanitarian response. Because we are used to the big organization, the big international organization. Look at the newspapers. Look at the reports. Those who are working on the ground, reading the needs, is the Ukrainian Red Cross. And even yesterday, when I met Antonio Gutierrez, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the first thing that he told me after, "Good morning, Francesco, nice to see you," he told how he was impressed by the work of the Ukrainian Red Cross. So they are writing a new part of the history, because they were questioned about the need of the international organization, and we were championing as a federation always the importance of the local actors, theoretically. They showed, but of course, maybe we will have time also to talk about COVID and the role of local actors, but they were the ultimate evidence on how the local actor, well organized and well supported, but at the center of the strategy when it comes about the humanitarian response, can make the real difference for the life of millions in this case. So this is why I think they are helping us in rewriting part of the humanitarian history, because we are talking about the localization process since 2016. After the Grand Bargain and the World Humanitarian Summit. But now COVID plus this crisis have shown the importance of the local actor. So this is my first thoughts. I don't want to steal too much of the time when it comes about Ukraine. I want to use this occasion before you give the floor to her, that I was impressed by Jenelle and the work that she did. I knew her when she was on board of the vessel, as you mentioned, but also in Ukraine. You know, being a media person, a media spokesperson for the Red Cross, while the journalists are always trying to find bloody stories and remaining consistent with the values and principles in a moment of our history in which the world is very polarized. Is that something that I want to really commend the work, and I told also Gail, your CEO, about how happy we are of the support that Jenelle, but also the other colleagues of the American Red Cross did and are doing in Ukraine and the neighboring countries. So thank you very much, the American Red Cross, for the support. And maybe we will talk later about also the cash program, because it is an important part of the response that we are giving in Ukraine.
Thank you. Yes, Jenelle is wonderful. So I did want to ask Jenelle, you were speaking about local actors. Jenelle, you were deployed to Eastern Europe for several weeks and meeting local actors and helping to share their stories. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about your deployment. How long were you there? You know, talk a little bit about the work and some of the people that you met in Eastern Europe.
Sure, I'd love to. And thank you so much, President Rocca. It's always great working with you. I'm so glad to be here. And you know, I think all action that's global is local, right? So it's like we're in chapters around the world, and it's amazing to see volunteers there and amazing to see volunteers here, board members, donors, etc. Because it's like, I mean, people in Ukraine, Poland, Romania, all these places affected. I mean, their volunteers were responding to things like home fires and car accidents. They were teaching first aid, and now they've really pivoted, just like people here would do. So I just think it's really amazing and to be here and know that volunteers all over the world, no matter where you are, Red Cross volunteers are doing similar things and really carrying out our mission. So thanks for being part of that. It just like warms my heart whenever I think about it and visit all over the world. So I was in Romania and Poland for 5 weeks. And I was supporting the IFRC and Red Cross teams to be delivering aid to refugees in need. I was really struck in Romania. I mean, the borders were all really different. So there was a border that crosses the Danube River, and people need to take a ferry in order to cross from Ukraine to Romania. And that was the first place I went. And, you know, we hear stories of people fleeing, and it's heartbreaking, but to see it unfolding in front of your eyes is just, it's like feels indescribable. But I saw women, like, you know, you hear that there's a lot of women and little kids, but I saw women who were pushing a stroller with one hand and just dragging luggage with the other. And it was like everything that they had in their lives. They had just left their partners in their homes and taken this really long journey, and finally were able to come into Romania and feel safe. And that struck me right away because it was also like, as soon as they were coming across the ferry, people were running to help them. So that was the government, and it was Red Cross volunteers. People were helping them, like taking their luggage from them, bringing wheelchairs for older people who needed it, greeting kids with like little stuffed toys and things like that. I mean, just the first day I was there, I was like, oh, I understand what this mission is about. And so it was like both heartbreaking and also heartwarming. So that's a big part of what I do for the American Red Cross is be able to make sure that the media can tell the story of the humanitarian needs and that they're seeing what the story is. And also just being able to talk to families about their experiences and Red Cross volunteers too, just to see how they're connected. When I was in Romania, one of the things that struck me the most is that the Red Cross volunteers were providing medical care and food and water and really the basics that people need, right? Even like baby carriers and strollers and things. But one of the first things people asked for were SIM cards because so many people obviously were separated from their family members. Their SIM card wasn't working in a new country. And so the Red Cross volunteers were offering mobile charging and SIM cards. And I was just like, that's so creative. Like, of course people need SIM cards, right? And it was just like, the first thing you want to do is call your family back home and be like, I'm safe. Are you safe? And it's just the instinct we all would have. And I loved that the Red Cross and really other humanitarian organizations who are all coming together could think creatively about the needs. Even one of the like smaller needs I never would have thought of, like a lot of people came with their cats and dogs. And so there was even pet food, things like that. So we can talk about the big things and we will, but I think it's often the small things that are actually really important to people who are fleeing.
Thank you, Jenelle. So you were mentioning cash assistance. I was just wondering if you could maybe speak more broadly about how you've seen the needs and that have the needs on the ground in Ukraine and in Eastern Europe and the neighboring countries, and how they've evolved and how the Red Cross network has evolved in their response to those needs.
Okay. I think now we are moving in the second phase. So we started to plan together with the Ukrainian Red Cross and the national societies of the neighboring countries, just mid-long-term plans, because we don't know, but we must be prepared. For sure, those who have lost everything in the affected areas, in the areas of the military operations, they need houses. Now they are in temporary shelters. So we are offering to our system, through the sister national societies, to build shelters for these families that are stranded in the other cities, in Lviv, in Kiev, in every region, even in Chernivtsi, which is hundreds of kilometers far away from the affected areas. There are 300,000 refugees, and many are hosted in the families of friends, relatives, or in other in schools. So we are discussing how we can support the building of shelters, and then to give now in the second phase is when there is a first phase, of course, first things you have to provide the basics, so water, food, medicines, but these are in the middle and the long term is not a dignified manner. So we have learned through different experiences that the cash-based assistance is the most dignified way to support communities. So this is fortunately, we received a lot of solidarity. So through the solidarities and the funds that we received through our donors mechanism, we are thinking to assist in Poland and Ukraine, but of course in both countries this is under discussion with the local authorities, with the European Union, but this is our will and this is something that we will do. So now we are discussing the technicalities about the program, but the commitment and the will is to distribute cash assistance monthly so that they can decide how to meet their needs. It's not according to our needs. Even the best intention, you will never meet the entire needs of a family. So I think that this is the most significant. We have learned this in Turkey, where together with the Turkish Request Center, the IFRC is assisting millions. But even before, we did it in Cox's Bazar. So for those that fled Myanmar after the crisis, and so we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people stranded in Myanmar now since many years. And this is a part of the most important part of the humanitarian response in this place. So we are talking about long term. So we are planning to stay in support of the Ukrainian Red Cross for as much as they will need. In the other countries, of course, we are doing an important job together in the dialogue with governments, but there is also, just to be very clear, a very strong European mechanism of civil protection. So the situation is quite different in the European Union, even in terms of financial sustainability. So, of course, we are paying the attention mostly within Ukraine, because we are talking about millions of people that are stranded in the country. In Italy, for example, we received 100,000, but for us is not a big burden in terms of integration and inclusion at community level. So, but the need in Ukraine is a very important one, even of course because it's not enough talk, but the inflation rate is increasing even in Ukraine. So this is so the economic situation is not in perfect condition, I would say. So this is it's a very difficult economic situation in Ukraine. So it's an important program. That's it.
This type of support where we have so many different actors, so many different Red Cross actors. I was wondering if either of you could speak on kind of the coordination between the Federation, the ICRC, and then the local societies.
This is something that during the year, so we have really refined, and now I think that we can talk about a very good coordination. The mandates are different. The role of the Federation that I chair is to support the national societies and to coordinate the several national societies, 192 national societies all around the world. And this is my role as a federation, is the role of the secretariat, then at operational level, to coordinate the support from the American Red Cross, Canadian Red Cross, the UK, and the other nationals, Japan. I can list really. In this case, everywhere has been so generous towards this crisis. So we don't want to have duplication. This is one of the main risks. And this is why we have an office that is working hand in hand with the Federation, and in with the Ukrainian Red Cross and the colleagues of the ICRC. I will come to them in a few minutes, but also with the UN system. So because even with them, we have to avoid duplication. Is not is something that during many years we have learned that is a risk to waste resources if we don't coordinate. And so it's vital and it's happening on the ground. There are cluster meetings regularly, so to avoid, and the Ukrainian Red Cross is in dialogue with because the national societies are auxiliary to their governments. This is one of the basic. So it's their role to have this kind of interlocution with their authorities, and then reporting to us, and then we plan together our operation. So now it is under discussion where we will work. So if we will take over one area, one region, two region, three region, and then maybe other UN organization will take over the cash program in other area, because of course we are talking about billions if you look at the long term, not about millions. Secondly, the role of the ICRC is it's the neutral body par excellence. So their mandate is just for this situation. Is in situation, unfortunately, like this, that they found the reason to exist. The neutral body that should be respected by everyone, to protect civilians, to visit the prisoners of war, to facilitate the exchange of prisoners, to evacuate the wounded, the civilians from the affected areas, or to allow the humanitarian access. Because we always talked also about always too much about the evacuation, which is of course a vital part for those who want to flee the areas. But then there is also the humanitarian access. So thousands and thousands don't want to flee their routes; they want to stay there. And if you think at the moment the war started at the end of February, so they were cut off from everything in certain areas: electricity, water, food. The logistics was completely shut down in that area. So humanitarian access is also having the possibility to support the civilians in the affected areas. So this is part of the role of the IFRC in negotiating with both sides in a very neutral manner, which is very difficult because also in this case, the neutrality has been tested, because it's very difficult to be accepted at community level. No, if they see that you are talking also with the counterpart. So this is something. Is the most delicate part. Is the most confidential one, because it's part of negotiation that sometimes, unfortunately, it can last days and days, and we have seen, unfortunately, these during the Mariupol crisis. But then, in this very moment, for example, the ICRC is working hard with the prisoners evacuated from Mariupol, and they are listing them, they are visiting them, bringing messages to the families. But they are doing the same from the prisoners of war, the Russian prisoners of war. This is our traditional role, and it's the role specifically of the ICRC to do this very often. For some evacuation, they used and they worked together hand in hand with the Ukrainian Red Cross, of course. But both of us, for different purposes, they are in touch with the Russian authorities. I'm in touch with the Russian Red Cross, because it's our duty to stay connected and to support the national societies in this case, because we talked about the western side, I would say, but it's also the eastern part that is having difficulties in terms at operational level. So I am in touch with the president of the Russian Red Cross regularly, just to verify and explore. And we have a delegation in Moscow of the Federation, which is working to support the Russian Red Cross. This is our role. Together, IFRC, ICRC, and national society for the movement. When we talk about the movement, maybe you listen to me when it comes about the different mandates. I use this metaphor, which is maybe for me, when I listened the very first time, I was impressed because it's very clear. The ICRC is like the father, and the IFRC is like the mother, because we have also having the disciplinary measures just to educate the 192 sons, so and or daughters. So, but this is I think the perfect metaphor about the movement and how we work together. And in Ukraine, the coordination is really excellent in every form, and it couldn't be different. Couldn't be everywhere, but especially in delicate situation like the one in Ukraine, because there is also an issue of security. So it's we cannot risk the life of the volunteers and the staff. So we have a mechanism of coordination that's I would say quite perfect. And this not only Ukraine. If you look at the number of accidents in the humanitarian field in the last 10 years, we are the one with the lowest level, fortunately, Sometimes it happens also to us, but the quality of the coordination is very high.
Thank you, Francesco. So the numbers fleeing their homes in Ukraine brings us to the broader conversation of migration, which is the reason for your stay here in New York. The crisis brought on by conflict there is just one of the many stemming from interrelated issues of armed conflict, climate change, disasters, and environmental degradation. So you're both here to take part in the International Migration Forum, which is discussing progress on the Global Compact on Migration, the first ever UN non-binding agreement on a common approach to international migration in all its dimensions, comprising 23 objectives for international, national, and local governments. I want to talk to Jenelle and kind of speak a little bit more of the people who are impacted by these crises, that are pushing them from their homes. And can you talk to me a little bit about the work that you've done on the Ocean Viking ships? I know you've been on a couple different rescue vessels over the past 5 years or so, and you've been telling stories and meeting the people. I'm sure you have some incredible stories, but if you could talk to me, first of all, about your last trip on this Mediterranean ship, and how long were you on the ship, and just talk a little bit about the people who are being rescued and kind of who they are at the personal level.
Sure. So yes, as Michael said, I've been on 2 different rescue vessels on behalf of the Red Cross. This past one was in October and November last year. I think I spent about 5 weeks aboard there as well. And really, I mean, what we're doing on this rescue ship is there are people launching off of the Libyan coast, and they find themselves in really precarious situations in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. It is nighttime, it is terrifying, and they're in rafts and rickety boats that are really have very little chance of making it to land. And so our rescue ship is able to actually help people who are in distress at sea, bring them aboard our ship, and then provide care, medical care, food, water, child care, because there's a lot of kids and babies and also pregnant women who are trying to make this journey. But once they come aboard our ship, they know they're safe. People have found themselves in Libya for various reasons. Some are fleeing conflict, so they're coming from places like Syria. Others maybe went to Libya to work, and they were working there for a little while, and all of a sudden they weren't being paid. They were in a forced labor situation. Women especially were in really dangerous situations. And so they knew that they couldn't stay any longer. So a lot of people were able to make it to the Libyan coast and try to flee to safety. Some of them have tried several times, and they were put in detention camps just for trying. But once they're on board, I mean, last time I was there, we were able to rescue more than 300 people. 50 of them were under the age of 18. So there was a 10-year-old traveling alone. There were a lot of teenagers who were traveling alone. None of them had expected that they'd be in that situation, but really migration in general, a lot of families get separated. So whether it was conflict or whether it was a different reason, people ended up separated from their siblings, from their parents, aunts, uncles, and really what they needed to do was get to safety and figure out what their next steps were. I mean, people have numbers written on their arms or stuffed in a pocket, and we're hoping they didn't get wet. And again, that's another thing we're able to do is hope when they reach land, able to help reconnect families. So that's part of what I was doing on the Mediterranean Sea. It was an extremely difficult deployment. I've been lots of places around the world, but this was, I mean, living on a ship. I don't know if anyone here has done it, probably, but it's pretty hard. Can't leave. So it was just like spatially, mentally, physically a hard one. But it was also like, I mean, this I think is just one of the very most essential things that the Red Cross is doing. I mean, we're just literally watching a potential mass casualty situation unfold in front of your eyes. And the fact that we're there means these lives were saved. And to be honest, if we weren't, there's not a lot of rescue ships out there. So I think it's pretty amazing work.
Now you've been deployed on the ship on multiple occasions. I think the first time was in 2016. Last time was just a couple months ago.
Mhm.
Did you notice any differences between those two deployments in terms of the context, the people that maybe struck you?
Sure. So in 2016 when I was on board, we actually went back and forth several times to make rescues, because as soon as we rescued people, we were able to take them to a port of safety, which means a country of safety, right? Most likely in Europe. This time around, we were on this ship for so long because we rescued people and then we had to basically beg to be able to land in a port of safety. And so some of the people we rescued were actually on board our rescue ship for 12 days. And yeah, we have the basics. We have food and water and like triaging medical care, right? Like a floating emergency room. But we were 3 days from running out of baby formula. And so really, I mean, just migration in general has become, a sticky topic, or, people have lots of opinions. For us, we don't have an opinion. We have life. We want to save lives. But it's getting harder and harder because, when we're waiting for a port of safety for 12 days, that means we're not able to go out and get more people. We're kind of full. So that was one thing that certainly struck me.
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit more about the Global Compact for Migration. From my understanding, you're here to discuss the progress. If you could talk to me, Francesco, talk to us about some of, well, I guess, first of all, what is the Red Cross, Red Crescent role within the Global Compact for Migration?
I think the first role of the Red Cross, Red Crescent is bringing what we see every day, because we are present in the country of origin, in the country of transit, and in the countries of destination. So we are present the entire path of the migrants, whatever is the reason they are fleeing or leaving their own countries. We are there in many places providing services. In this moment, all over the world, we have more than 300 humanitarian service points on which we provide basic assistance and info to the migrants, regardless of their legal status, ethnicity, religions, and whatever. So honestly, I'm here just to witness, just to understand why it's so difficult. To me, I try is an occasion to meet and discuss with the political leaders, with the diplomat community, to understand why this issue is so polarizing. Why we have become so deaf to the call for life. And this is because this is this is the main reason I'm here. So this is the Global Compact signed by the government, but I was astonished when I've seen in Marrakesh countries like also mine one, Italy, they didn't sign the Global Compact, because the Global Compact doesn't deny the right to protect the border to anyone. It's really clear that all the countries have the right to protect their borders. So it's out of question. We are talking about what Jenelle explained: saving lives, dignity, access to the basic services, regardless the status, regardless the several differences that maybe could seem that we have, religious, ethnicity, whatever. This is the basic. This is our shared humanity. And so the presence here is it's a political, but in a political one, but in the noble sense, because then I cannot deny that everyone that I speak about migration now, for the very first time, I'm sure that I'm perceived as making a political statement. It's really testing. And it's so difficult. I remember that I used this metaphor here, but I want to reiterate for those that don't remember this metaphor that I'm going to use. So why no one, and you in US and New York, you have a very, very strong tradition. Why no one is questioning the firefighters when they go because a building is on fire? They don't ask the documents to anyone when they save lives. Then it's up to the police department to verify. Then the dog once that everyone is safe in a dignified manner. Once that everyone has received water and care or health care when it's needed after a fire. It's very normal. But if we do this in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, we are perceived in complicity with the smugglers. So I'm still, after so many years of working in the front line about migration, how we can change the narrative about it. Because it's getting worse and worse. And I'm speaking clearly because I know that even in the US, this is an open debate. But we are not talking, we don't enter in the talks, in the political talks about citizenships, right to stay or not to stay. We're talking really about the basics and dignity. So the reason why is just to bring this message. And to bring also another message, because what struck me after the Ukrainian crisis is that maybe it's not true that our hearts are closed, because see about the openness that we were ready to give to millions of Ukrainians that fled in few days, millions in few days. And then Europe was stuck for weeks, few months ago, because few hundreds were at the border between Belarus and Poland. So where is the difference for those who are fleeing Boko Haram or other situation of violence, or ISIS or Daesh or whatever you want to call, or many hidden crises or situation of violence and conflict in Africa and Middle East, but because they are not enough told, they find closed hearts. Because this is about the narrative. Because I don't see any differences between a woman that is fleeing from Ukraine and a woman that is fleeing from Nigeria, fleeing the violence of Boko Haram. Honestly. So I think that we have really to think also through the professionalism of people like Jenelle, not because she's sitting here, but I think it's also their role in supporting those who are of responsibility like mine one, to find a new narrative, because we failed. We failed in something that should be very common and very natural. Even in August, I had experienced a very strange one last August. So when the West decided to leave Afghanistan, I think that you all remember what has happened in the following days and the desperation of many families that want to find a place of safety. And I remember even in Italy, I was called by one important politician, famous and very accused to be a xenophobic one. Oh, Francesco, please help me. I'm ready to host a family with babies if needed. So, no, the narrative. So I think that there is still space for humanity. It's something that we have to work at community level a lot. We have a center near Turin. Turin is a city in the northwest of Italy. It's a little town of 35,000 inhabitants. In 6 years, in our hosting center for refugees and migrants, passed more than 50,000 of refugees without one accident, without one problem at community level, just because we had the full support of the municipality that worked with us at community level to explain the stories, to explain the background of which they were coming from. So 50,000 without one accident in many years. So a different format to include is possible. So I think that at community level, we have a big responsibility and we have to work toward this. And this is why I'm here, just to present our experiences in saving lives, our experiences in the countries of origin, and to present this to the diplomat and the governments that are present to this event, which is by the end an important one. So it's good that we discuss. So this is not another hidden crisis, even because the more we talk about migration, maybe the more we were able to identify the causes of migration and fix the causes of migration. I always told that I started to be a volunteer in 1988 in Italy, young one, receiving people fleeing Horn of Africa. Ask her how many from Horn of Africa they met in the vessel. Still 30 years after, receiving people of Horn of Africa, after billions invested, after we failed. We were not able to fix the causes. And it's very frustrating from the humanitarian perspective, because 35 years later, I'm still receiving in Italy people and mostly for the same reason. Now aggravated by the drought, which is the current one was one of the most severe in decades, plus the economical crisis, plus the climate-induced disasters, and they can continue.
Thank you. I have a question for Jenelle. Been on a lot of deployments around the world. Do you have a story that sticks with you based on one of these deployments that you carry with you? That wasn't one of those.
Yeah. I just have so many, to be honest. It's like, oh my gosh, when I think about it. Well, you know, since we're on the subject of migration, I was in Cox's Bazar, this refugee camp in Bangladesh that's hosting refugees from Myanmar, more than 1 million now. And there was a mother there, there's lots of mothers. This mother, she has 4 kids, and her kids are able to get some education while they're there. But these camps are very rudimentary. I mean, they're very muddy and hilly, and they're difficult places to live. And they're actually quite dangerous because people slip a lot. Also, there's tons of flooding in really big storms. And part of what the Red Cross and the Bangladesh Red Crescent are doing is teaching first aid classes, and also having refugees themselves teach first aid classes and be prepared for any disasters that come their way. And so this mother, she had so much responsibility in her life. I mean, she's trying to like feed her kids and get them to school and just survive in this really difficult place. But she decided to take first aid and become a first aid leader, because she just said, of course I'm here, I'm going to help my neighbors. I go, what choice do I have? But the reality is she did have a choice. But I just think it's so emblematic of people I meet all over the world that they always step up to help one another. And I think what you said was so prescient of like, our hearts are open, and I see such painful, and I hear such painful stories all over the globe. But more than that, there is like a lot of hope, and there's a lot of helpers. And so that's one story I just will never forget, because I think it's symbolic of so many people I've met.
Thank you. So one last question for Francesco before we move to questions. Are we okay with it? What is something that you have learned recently about the Red Cross that you didn't know and maybe inspires you over these past 2-3 months?
It's what I just told at the beginning. I've been struck by the response of the Ukrainian Red Cross. Believe me, this is it's really impressive, because I've been there in 2013, so I knew the starting point of the National Society. And but it was, as I said, also an ultimate evidence. Maybe this is give me the opportunity to tell what I learned. I learned that the Red Cross, Red Crescent family is a very strange one, because normally, but I think it's the same in the life of branches, because this reminds me also the life of volunteer. So when we have nothing to do, there are no crises. Sometimes there are a lot of discussion in the corridors, complaints and discussions. Then when a disaster strike, we are able to give the best. And I've seen this even during the COVID. COVID, I think that has proved how each national society is able to give its best when it's tested, and with the good leadership. I've seen this with pride, sometimes also with tears for the emotion, because I didn't expect this kind of miracle from some places. I will never tell which places, but I've seen everyone able to give the best. Look, I had the privilege, and I feel that I'm privileged during COVID, during these 2 years, to watch from the Pacific Islands to the most far and difficult branch to reach in the African continent or in South or Central America. The miracle of being present and to be a point of trust at community level. And this has happened beyond my expectations everywhere. Normally, I was used before this experience. Oh, I represent 192 national societies, just like a mantra, no? Just to repeat. Now I feel really the pride. I represent someone that made the difference in the life of millions everywhere. And I have all the evidences. It's not anymore a story. It's something that every day, in that period, especially at the beginning, in the first 6 months, I had periodically meeting with a lot of national societies, especially for those who were tested by the COVID in a very difficult manner. And every national society was able to find its place at community level, not the same response, but to find the place and the right place about the needs that was not covered in its country, and able to cover that need. Receiving the gratitude of many head of states, many governments for what their national societies did. So I see really the privilege to touch what we rhetorically talk the power of humanity. You know, in many occasions we talk about power of humanity, power of humanity. Then when it comes about global challenges, you could touch, I could touch this happening in every place of the world in the same moment. So it was not anymore the Italian Red Cross branch that maybe did something very good, or the American Red Cross branch. We were doing something that's for me really strong. And this is why I'm insisting about the importance to invest in the capacity building, and at the same time, the need to invest as a federation on the integrity issue. Because when we lose trust, it takes years to recover the trust. Trust must always be protected. So as a volunteers and as a staff, we have a big responsibility when we wear the emblem everywhere. And she knows very well, because she could tell you there is something very important. In how many occasions the people told her, I know because it's the same for the Italian Red Cross volunteer, oh, the Red Cross, we are safe. People coming from different countries. Yeah. Red Cross, we are safe.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I hear it all the time, and it's like, sometimes I just think it sounds like a story, but it's like people literally just say that to my face. I mean, when we were on the ship, people thought they were going to be arrested. They didn't know who we were, and they saw the Red Cross and they saw the Red Crescent, and they knew they were safe. And they'd say that because they were so grateful and you could tell they were so scared. But of course, they know the Red Cross and Red Crescent from their home countries, and they've seen them along the way, especially all over on the migration route. So it's just like, you know what direction to go. It's pretty amazing. I saw that in train stations too in Poland. I was wearing the Red Cross in a train station and people just would come up to me.
Yes,
Where do I go? Where do I go?
And in the highway, when we were going to Vinica, it was 3 hours and a half by car from the Romanian border. So we stopped in a how should say in a bar on the highway, and they offered us coffee and sandwiches. I didn't want to be paid. So just in recognition, so the gratitude of the community is really moving. It's really amazing. But then you feel the responsibility.
Yeah.
Then you feel the responsibility. It's really a crime against humanity when we betray the trust that we build, and our predecessors were able to build, and the hours that our volunteers invest freely to build trust at community level. So this is one of the important points that I'm stressing as a president. Now we were able to show what we are able to do and to make the difference in life of millions. Now we bear the responsibility to protect this trust everywhere. You don't have any excuse anymore. Even in national societies that were having difficulties, or you have shown that you are able to do. And it's your time to do it. We are ready to support, of course, but it's about the local leadership that must do this.
Just want to, on behalf of the American Red Cross in Greater New York, thank you so much, Francesco. Really incredible conversation. It's an honor for us to host you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all.